This is Rob Kilmer. Pakistan is the most important foreign policy issue for the United States right now. I will explain why. Also, an update on filming the pilot for the You Defend It debate series. That's what we're talking about this week on You Defend It. Welcome to You Defend It with Rob Kilmer. The phone number to call into the show is 772-1290. As always, callers to the show will need to take a position, be able to defend it with an argument that is factual, not emotional, and if you can't make your point without insulting someone, you can't make your point on this show. Callers and guests on the show will be treated with complete respect. For my part, I will ask questions that matter and give people the opportunity to answer. My website is www.youdefendit.com. That's youdefendit.com. You can give me your comments on the show anytime. By Friday of each week, I will have the topic up for the next show. You can also visit my blog through the site. You can read my posts and leave your own. The lineup for the Sunday talk shows will also be posted there on Saturdays. You can always listen to my show live on streaming audio on www.wnbf.com, and my show is uploaded after it airs later on Saturdays, so you can listen to it from there if you missed it live. Finally, there is a new debate suggestions section. It is at the top of the home page. Leave me your thoughts on topics, debaters, and questions. All right, this week we're going to talk about Pakistan, and then in the second half of the show, I will talk to you about the progress that has been made on the filming of the pilot for the You Defend It debate series. And I'm happy to report that there is much to report along those lines. Okay, Pakistan. I want to read first from an article in Fox News, or from Fox News online. This is April 30th, 2009. General David Petraeus, commander of U.S. Central Command, has told U.S. officials that the next 2 weeks are critical to determining whether the Pakistani government will survive, Fox News has learned. The Pakistanis have run out of excuses and are finally getting serious about combating the threat from Taliban and al-Qaeda extremists operating out of northwest Pakistan, the general added. But Petraeus also said wearily that we've heard it all before from the Pakistanis, and he is looking to see concrete action by the government to destroy the Taliban in the next 2 weeks before determining the United States' next course of action, which is presently set on propping up the Pakistani government and military with counterinsurgency training and foreign aid. American officials have watched with anxiety as Taliban fighters advanced earlier this month to within 70 miles of the capital city of Islamabad. In recent days, the Pakistani army has sought to reverse that tide, retaking control over strategic points in the district of Bunair, even as Taliban struck back by kidnapping scores of police and paramilitary troops. They said Petraeus and senior administration officials believe the Pakistani army, led by Chief of Staff General Asfaq Kayani, is superior to the civilian government, which is led by President Ali Zardari, and could conceivably survive even if Zardari's government falls to the Taliban. As for the security of the Pakistani nuclear arsenal, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said last Saturday in an interview with Fox News in Baghdad that the U.S. believes the arsenal to be, quote, safe, end quote, but only, quote, given the current configuration of power in Pakistan, end quote. She described as unthinkable a situation in which the Zardari government were to be toppled by the Taliban, adding, quote, then they would have the keys to the nuclear arsenal of Pakistan, and we can't even contemplate that. We cannot let this go any further, end quote. The officials who spoke with Petraeus, however, said he and they believe that even were Zardari's government to fail, it was still conceivable that Kayani's army could maintain control over the nuclear arsenal. Okay, that was kind of a long article for me to read, and that wasn't the entire article. But I left in there everything I thought was important. What does that mean? that means that we've got a crisis on our hands in Pakistan. But there's more to it, and I think it's a good thing. Gone are the days where we are talking about democracy and that being an essential characteristic of any government that we support in that region of the world. And I'm going to get to a second example of that in a minute. Glaringly absent from this article from Fox News was that we are going to do what we have to do to maintain the elected government in Pakistan in order to protect it from the military, which could take over. We are saying quite the opposite. When you see phrases like senior administration officials believe the Pakistani army is superior to the civilian government, a major shift in foreign policy has taken place. And it should. It should be the goal of the foreign policy of the United States to promote what is in the best interests of the United States. This is a perfect example, Pakistan, right now, of a situation where promoting democracy is not in the best interests of the United States. Because of the way our foreign policy has been handled over the last 8 years, primarily in public, at the podium, as opposed to the way it should have been handled, which was discreetly between undersecretaries and through diplomatic channels where you get your message across to the other side's government without necessarily inflaming the other side's public against you, thereby making it impossible for the other side's government to assist you. We have a situation now where we are basically saying to the Pakistani government, whichever one can get the job done, that's who we're going to support. If it's the military taking over, which ironically is how the previous president, Musharraf, became the president of Pakistan, then that's who we're going to support. It looks right now like the military is better equipped to take on the Taliban. And when I say that, I mean that if the military took over Pakistan, then Pakistan would be in a better position to fight the Taliban than the civilian government controlling Pakistan right now. 70 miles from nuclear weapons. That is roughly the distance from this studio to the Carrier Dome. That is a threat. That's a real threat. We don't have to wonder about the actual existence of weapons of mass destruction. We know they're there. They've been tested. This is how American foreign policy should be conducted. We need to choose the people who are going to assist us the most. This good versus evil thing, sometimes it has to take a back seat when it comes to protecting the United States itself. You don't want a democratically elected government in a region of the world that despises the United States, because then you're going to end up with a government that despises the United States. That's not how you get the work of the United States done. I'm sure to some people reading or hearing that article that we are implicitly supporting the military over the civilian government there. That's a bit of a shocker. It shouldn't be. The fate of the United States right now, more so than it was in Iraq, is tied to who prevails over there. And right now, the military is the best bet. We'll be back. You're listening to You Defend It with Rob Kilmer right here on News Radio 1290 WMBF Binghamton. Welcome back to You Defend It with Rob Kilmer. Phone number to call into the show is 772-1290, as Lucas has done. Lucas, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Welcome to the show.
Yes. As far as Pakistan is concerned, I mean, one of the things, and this sort of goes into what you're saying, is each country is its own political universe. With Pakistan, the two prime political leaders who have been elected to power, in other words, one sort of playing president, the other's playing prime minister, and they're associated in a coalition, although they're both bitter rivals to each other. Both men are heirs to political dynasties that lead one of the large ethnic elements in Pakistan. Each one represents their own ethnic. I think one is sort of Punjabi, and I think the other one's Sindhi. And neither of those are the ones which the Taliban, they're not the Pashtuns, which the Taliban draws its strength from.
That is true.
So in other words, you have very much a tribal element in this government. And the reason why Musharraf it couldn't hang on and all that was, even though he was a general, he is ethnically of a Muslim group that was driven out of India. So in other words, his parents were, and he himself was actually born in India. His family refugeed out when India and Pakistan became independent and split off from each other. So Musharraf didn't have the tribal power base. So in other words, if one of these generals comes to power, decides to send these two guys packing, and he could have reasons to do so because both of these guys have, when they in or near power, the one of them who is Benazir Bhutto's widower, both of these guys have track records of corruption and power.
That is right. Well, but, I mean, in general, I think most of that, and that is all true, but from the perspective of the United States and perhaps from the perspective of a good segment of the population in Pakistan, everybody has their loyalties, but when you have the Taliban 70 miles out, I think things change. And if you have, again, from the perspective of the United States and from the perspective of the Pakistani public, if you cannot deal with that threat, you're gone. And that's just the way it has to be.
Yeah, well, that's part of the problem. But in other words, Musharraf's weakness was that he didn't have a tribal power base. Probably almost any other general in the Pakistani army will be, in other words, he'll be a Sindhi, he'll be a Punjabi, or he'll be, in other words, he will have a segment of the population behind him simply because of his ethnic background, and he could use troops from his ethnic tribe to confront the Taliban. Now, the thing is it may be that because the Taliban is drawn from the Punjabis, and they're not the biggest ethnic group in Pakistan by any means, that they can, the current civilian leadership can, if they work together, could rally the bulk of the Pakistani population into a military effort against the Taliban to get rid of them, because a lot of them don't believe in kind of nonsense that the Taliban will go into.
Right.
I don't know. I think this was covered a few years ago in Newsweek, where you had an incident where two Pashtun clans sort of had they were interrelated families, had an agreement to end a feud that had been going on. And part of the agreement was that some gentlemen in their 70s would be getting brides. These brides were of the ripe old age of 4 and 2. Musharraf sent one of his judges from Islamabad under military escort to that town. The judge ruled that those two girls were too young to be given away as brides to anyone, let alone the fact that they were being offered to men who were in their 70s. And they had to provide a military escort to get that judge out of town and put him on a military flight back to Islamabad before he could be assassinated for his ruling. Now this is probably an extreme example, but the thing is the majority of people in Pakistan do not want the kind of Islam that the Taliban preaches, even though. But the one thing we are doing is by going in public and berating the Pakistanis, we're creating big problems. Now, if we wanted to do something positive, we would help Pakistan get large infantry forces into the regions, because one thing that has historically worked in suppressing this kind of insurgency is if you could flood a region with troops. Now, Pakistan has a large army. It's stuck on the border facing India because India has a huge army on its border with Pakistan. Now, if India did some concession that would say, we are not going to take advantage of you in this particular crisis by, say, take all their armored units that are on the border and pull them back and just leave infantry, which would be what you would need to secure a border from infiltrators who want to create another Mumbai incident, then you can take the troops that you could take divisions that are infantry divisions that are stuck on the Pakistani border and redeploy them, and you can simply overwhelm the Taliban with sheer force of numbers.
Okay, I actually got to. I'm running a little long here, but we'll talk about this. I'll talk about your comments in a second here. But thanks very much for calling in.
You're welcome.
Bye. You know, one of the things you don't hear, and you should, is that the need for, and it's really like everything else in that region of the world. There's more than one conflict going on, and they all relate to one another, and there are consequences from all of them that have to be factored in to decisions that are made when you deal with any one of them. What he was saying about India is true. When I mentioned before that, you know, as is well known, Pakistan has nuclear weapons. Well, Pakistan and India tested nuclear weapons, basically each to intimidate the other. It was actually one of the more glaring intelligence failures of this country. I don't think we were aware that India was even on the verge of a nuclear weapon or even had a program, and all of a sudden they successfully tested one. But India and Pakistan share a border. They are enemies. What Jerusalem is to the Arab-Israeli conflict, you know, Kashmir is to the India-Pakistan conflict. We should be working to resolve that conflict so that we can take the pressure off the situation between India and Pakistan. We're not worried about India attacking us. We're not worried about India's desire to kill Americans. We are very worried about the Taliban and the people they support. But again, this should be done discreetly. And what he said about us publicly berating the Pakistanis is also true. We should be discreetly motivating however we need to do it. It's not pleasant sometimes. It's not ethical sometimes, but it's foreign policy. Whatever India needs, whatever needs to be done between India and Pakistan, at least in the short term, to take the tension away from that issue, from the issue between those two countries, should be done by our government, by our Secretary of State, so that Pakistan can wipe out that threat to Pakistan that is represented by the Taliban. You know, it was just 2-3 months ago that agreement was signed, giving the Taliban the Swat Valley. And what did they do? They've executed teenagers who were eloping. They've essentially implemented their law as they do everywhere else. If you violate the law, you run the risk of a fairly quick and heinous death. And Pakistani public, they may be tribal, as most of that region of the world is, But there are certain things that unite people. The Taliban is one of them. If it takes the military in Pakistan taking over, then it does. So be it. But, these situations are not about good and evil. That was the fraud of the last 8 years. They're more complicated than that. They require serious people with a serious understanding of the issues to come up with practical solutions to it. Not necessarily pleasant solutions, not necessarily democratic or moral, but solutions that assist the United States, solutions that promote our interests, protect our interests. Right now, we have to do whatever it takes to prevent the Taliban from taking over Pakistan. We don't have to worry about any phantom connections between nuclear weapons and the Taliban in this case. They're there. They're 70 miles from nuclear weapons. Or they were, I should correct that. They have since been driven back. But how long that lasts and how much further it goes, we don't want the Taliban driven back from 70 miles. We want the Taliban obliterated. We need that. And we need to do what it takes to make that happen, even if it's supporting a non-democratic government of Pakistan. That's the state of the world right now. We are going to take a break here for local news and be back after that. You are listening to You Defend It with Rob Kilmer right here on News Radio 1290 WNBF Binghamton. Welcome back to You Defend It with Rob Kilmer. The phone number to call into the show is 772-1290. We left off talking about Pakistan. I'm going to read to you an excerpt from an article, May 9th, that would be today, in the Washington Post. Obama picks Egypt as speech venue. President Obama will travel to Egypt next month to deliver his promised address to the Muslim world, culminating a long and politically sensitive selection process by choosing as his venue an Arab nation governed by an autocratic U.S. ally who faces strong internal Islamist opposition. Those elements will present challenges to Obama as he delivers a speech his advisors described yesterday as the next step in his effort to dispel perceptions in the Muslim world that the United States is in conflict with Islam. It will be the first stop in a trip that will also take him to Buchenwald, the former Nazi concentration camp in Germany, and then to Normandy in France to commemorate the 65th anniversary of the D-Day landing. Administration officials said Obama's trip next month will not include Israel, as some had expected. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will visit the White House on May 18th. By selecting Egypt, Obama could expose himself to criticism in the Arab Middle East for showing tacit support for President Hosni Mubarak, who has governed the country for nearly 3 decades with scant tolerance for political opposition. The 81-year-old Mubarak, who is scheduled to meet with Obama in Washington this month, has used his security services to harass and detain political rivals and is preparing for his son to succeed him. U.S. support for Mubarak and other unelected Arab leaders has been interpreted across the Middle East as hypocritical of American foreign policy, particularly in the past 8 years, during which the Bush administration made promoting democracy the centerpiece of its diplomacy in the region. But White House Press Secretary Robert Gibbs said yesterday that the selection of Egypt for the June 4 speech should not be viewed as an should not be viewed as an endorsement of Mubarak's government. He said that Egypt, quote, in many ways represents the heart of the Arab world, end quote, and noted that the issues of democracy and human rights are things that are on the president's mind and we'll have a chance to discuss those issues in more depth on the trip. This isn't a speech to leaders, Gibbs said. This is a speech to many, many people and a continuing effort by this President and this White House to demonstrate how we can work together to ensure the safety and security and the future well-being through hope and opportunity of the children of this country and of the Muslim world. Okay, why do it? Why do it in Egypt? Because it takes the pressure off. By giving a speech like this, you remove, or you're at least attempting to remove, some of the motivation for extremists and some of the recruitment tools of extremists. But why Egypt? Egypt isn't exactly a bastion of democracy in the Middle East. And you can tell from the language we're using that, the issues of human rights and things like that are on the president's mind, but he's not going over there to achieve human rights. He's going over there to lower the temperature on this whole Muslim issue that we have, on the whole issue of good versus evil and the United States versus Islam and radical Islam. We are at war with radical Islam. There's no more real need to talk about that aspect of it. Most of the Muslim world is not at war with us. There are people within the Muslim world who are. Those are the ones we want. Those are the ones we're going after. In the meantime, be smart about it. Do what you have to do to lower the heat. This isn't a global fight against Islam. This is a global fight against terrorism, which is practiced primarily by radical Islamists. Then let's get them. And Egypt. To me, this is what we should be doing. We should be going to our allies, not telling them how to run their country. The substance of the speech will be that we're not at war with the Muslim faith. The venue of the speech will convey the days of telling other countries that they need to move towards democracy are over, or at least suspended, because we have a bigger problem on our hands right now. We need help with it. We want help with it. It's cheaper with help. Fewer American soldiers die with help. Fewer American dollars are required with help. The first Gulf War cost us approximately $12 billion. 90% of the rest of it, 90% of the total cost of that war was reimbursed by other countries. 90%. When is the last time you read or heard anything about any other nation contributing financially to the war in Iraq, other than the costs of their own troops, which are minimal and diminishing by the day? Minimizing your enemies is a smart thing to do. Unnecessarily expanding the base of your enemies is a dangerous thing to do. It wins elections, but it costs American lives and money. I don't think Obama's afraid to pull the trigger when he has to. He gave the order to kill those pirates. Done. There's been no reduction in our military efforts since he became president. In fact, he's escalating the war in Afghanistan, where we need to win. He's escalating the effort in Pakistan, or trying to, where we need to win. But do it in a way, conduct the rest of your foreign policy in a way that makes it easier for you to achieve your objectives, not harder. That's the way it used to be done. That's the way it needs to be done. We should have a goal-driven policy, not a rhetoric-driven policy. And our goal should be to do what's best for the United States, not what's best for everyone else in the world. We can't pull it off. We shouldn't try. Why would they pick Egypt? Egypt is not much of a democracy. When's the last time you heard us denounce Saudi Arabia? Can't. Need them. But we're certainly not pushing democracy. Freedom is not on the march in the Middle East. Freedom is on the way out of the conversation in the Middle East. There are more important things for us to worry about and get done. And we can't do it by accusing everybody else of intolerance or a lack of commitment to human rights. They're not going to change because we tell them to. And now, because we've involved ourselves in 2 wars simultaneously, ironically, in an effort to show the world what our military can do, we have shown the world what our military cannot do alone, which is win. We can't win either of these wars alone. It's 2009, 8 years ago, we got underway in Afghanistan. It's not over. 6 years ago in Iraq. It's not over. And when we leave, what we leave there is going to be very different than what we said was going to be in place when we left. The Shia, they've gotten what they wanted in Iraq. They essentially control it now. And that's the way it has to be. We're not in a position to tell them how to run that country anymore. In fact, you may have seen recently we asked for an extension of the deadline to keep American troops in Iraq. Iraq said, no thanks. Thanks for everything, but get out. We got it now. And every time Israel is in the news, every time Israel is involved in any military confrontation, Iraq's leaders are some of the first to come out and denounce Israel. Well, that's the way it works when you don't have a plan in place to prevail. We're stuck with what we have in Iraq right now, which was not what we wanted, not what we expected when we started this in March of 2003. But it's what we have, and we have no way to change it. All right, when we come back, we'll talk about the You Defend It debate series and what is happening along those lines. And it's there's a lot to talk about with that. I kind of wish I had saved more time to do it. But we'll be back. You're listening to You Defend It with Rob Kilmer right here on News Radio 1290 WMBF Binghamton. Welcome back to You Defend It with Rob Kilmer. All right, the debates. This is tentative, but as I told you before, I'm going to update you as much as I can when I can. Even if it's tentative, I'm going to tell you about it. The topic is actually not tentative. The topic will be the proper role of the Supreme Court Justice. In other words, should the court interpret the Constitution as written, or is it a living, breathing, evolving document? This is the originalist versus judicial activism debate. And when I first announced that we were going to be doing the pilot and I was taking suggestions for topics, there were no vacancies on the Supreme Court. Then Justice Souter announced that he was retiring. Because the debate is going to be filmed, the pilot, at the end of June, tentatively, during the last week of June, at that time I expect a nominee to have been identified and the hearings to be underway to confirm her or him. I think it will be very timely, and we have talked on this show a number of times about judicial activism and what a judge should do and what the Constitution is, and it came up and we took advantage of it. We decided on that last Sunday. The venue will be, tentatively, the Waters Theater at the Anderson Center at Binghamton University. I'll be meeting with them again this week to hopefully confirm that and nail that down. So, at this point we have the topic, roughly the time during which it'll be, or when this will happen. It should be the last week in June. I am shooting for June 26th, which is a Friday. The venue will be at SUNY at the Waters Theater. I have one of the participants lined up, representing the viewpoint that justices should not be reading things into the Constitution that aren't there, will be Kurt Levy. He is Executive Director of the Committee for Justice. Committee for Justice is based in Washington, D.C. This is, according to their website, how they, or what their organization is about. The Committee for Justice and Committee for Justice Foundation is composed of eminent leaders, former government officials, legal scholars, and practitioners based in Washington, D.C., united to defend and promote constitutionalist judicial nominees to the federal courts, and educates the public on the importance of judges in American life. Honorable Spencer Abraham is chairman of the Committee for Justice. I got Kurt Levy's name. I was reading an article about one of Barack Obama's presumptive nominees and something that person had said, and the person who was cited in opposition to this nominee was Kurt Levy. So I was able to reach him and then talk to him the other night, and he has tentatively committed to representing that side of the debate. I hope by next week I can announce his opponent. But at this point, that is as much as I can update you on. I'm pretty pleased with the progress at this point. We have the topic, one of the debaters, the venue, and I think the date. So that's where that is. I do need to talk a little bit about the audience. I need to be able to give the university an idea ahead of time of how many people will be there. And in the next week or so, I will be establishing a place on my website for anybody who wants to attend the filming of the pilot to register in advance. It'll be at the You Defend It website. I have to organize with the university people they require a certain number of their people to be present, depending on the size of the crowd. And it's just one of those things that, in talking with them, I realized I needed to do. I need to have some way of determining who will be there for the filming. We're going to be meeting people. One-on-One Productions, by the way, is my company that will be producing this debate. We will be meeting with people from SUNY Monday, and I am still looking for, now that you know the topic, I will happily take your questions. If you have questions that you would like me to ask, or you would like, it won't be me asking, you would like asked either one of the debaters, then go to my website and leave the question or questions there. I want them. I want you to be as much a part of this as possible. If you have any suggestions on an opposing debater, somebody with a viewpoint different, and the way that you won't find anybody saying, I support judicial activism. What you will find, and judicial activism is another way to describe people who believe, or judicial activists is another term used to describe people who believe that the Constitution is an evolving document, and the way it is interpreted should change with the times, with the differences in American society, as opposed to how they were when the Constitution was drafted. So I will not be selecting somebody who supports judicial activism, because that is a term that people who believe that the Constitution is an evolving document, they don't accept the term judicial activism. They believe it is the proper role of a Supreme Court justice to look at today's America in interpreting the Constitution. As I have said on this show many times, there are no fact patterns in the Constitution. It has to be interpreted at all times. It is a collection of concepts. It is a collection of rules, but no facts. It is a collection of statements. And the amendments contain words like unreasonable. Somebody's got to interpret that. That word is not self-defining. It is fact-specific. So that is the type of person, or that is essentially the viewpoint of the person who will be on the other side from Kurt Levy. Somebody who believes that the Constitution should be interpreted in relation to the times in which it is being interpreted, as opposed to the way things were when it was drafted. And again, I hope to have that second debater identified by next week. And if you have any suggestions for who that other person should be, or questions you would like either side asked, then go to my website and let me know what they are, and we'll look at all of them. I will also be publishing the format of the debate on the website in the next, if not next week, then the week after. I want you to know as much about this as possible. I think that since I believe that this is the way issues should be discussed from now on in America, the least I can do is outline exactly how that is for you. It may sound grand and ambitious, but I believe that the You Defend It debate series should be the standard going forward for how important issues are discussed. You're always going to have the people on the far right and far left who are going to tell you who to fear, blame, and hate. And that's fine. But the rest of us, also known as the